Well, going into the 2026 election in Georgia, Republicans felt they had a massive, and I mean massive, opportunity to flip a seat that had been held by a Democrat since 2021. The GOP really saw this as an opportunity, not only to pick this seat up, but to expand the majority in the Senate in 2026. And all knowledge available to us right now told us that Brian Kemp in this race would be a GOP flip. He would put the GOP in the best position to flip this seat in 2026. But now, Brian Kemp announced just a week or two ago that he will not be running in this race, and Republicans are scrambling to find the best candidate to run and defeat Jon Ossoff. And although Brian Kemp is no longer a possibility for this race, I still believe that Republicans have a chance to flip this seat. I will concede the fact that it did get a bit harder. It got definitely harder to win this seat, but it is still doable. I'm not going to sit back and say that this is an automatic win. At the end of the day, Brian Kemp in this race or not, Jon Ossoff is the most vulnerable Democrat in the Senate. This is the most vulnerable seat for the Democrats going into 2026. It is one of two states that voted for President Trump in 2024 and has two Democrat senators, or has a Democrat senator or seat that is up for re-election. Georgia and Michigan. Michigan is a purple with a blue lean to it. Meanwhile, Georgia it's a purpley state with a Republican lean to it. Because like we said, it's a very interesting state. Like, don't get me wrong. It is a very interesting state. Go back 20 years and you see Georgia won by almost 12 points and almost 17 points. This was a Republican stronghold 20 years ago. It was a Democrat stronghold, and then it was a Republican stronghold. Jimmy Carter came from Georgia. This was look at this, 20 points for Bush Sr. in 1988. Go back to 76. Even though ultimately Ford lost this race right here, Jimmy Carter won the state of Georgia, 33 points. Look at this. You flipped almost every seat. Well, after a massive victory like this, it's like you're going to win states like this. It's like you flip a lot. You are flipping a lot. But ultimately, this is now a much more purpley state. And it's been a battleground state in almost every election in recent memory. And like we said, it's one of two states that voted for Trump in 24. They have a Democrat-held seat up for re-election in 26. And like we said, I would classify it as a purplish red state. The reality is they voted for President Trump in 2024 by about 2 percentage points. Biden won the state back in 2020 by roughly about 11,000 votes, which is about a quarter of a percentage point. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like we said, it is still a purpley toss-up state. And in this state, you know what matters? Candidate quality matters. Because look at this. Biden won in 2020 by about 11,000 votes. Fast forward to 2022. Very, very interesting thing that happened in 2022. You can see Raphael Warnock wins re-election by almost 3 percentage points over Herschel Walker in 2022. While at the same time, Governor Brian Kemp wins re-election by almost 8 percentage points. A much larger victory than he won in 2018 by only 1.5 points. You can see Brian Kemp winning by almost 8 points here. And for a purple state like this is a very healthy margin for a Republican. And a higher margin than Trump ever had in this state. Look at this. Trump won it by 5 points, lost it by a quarter of a percent, won it by 2. Trump didn't even get 5 percentage points. Kemp still had a 50% higher margin than Trump ever had. Almost an 8%, 7.5% percentage points right here. And you know why Raphael Warnock won re-election in 2022? It's because of weak candidates, poor candidate quality. You saw a spread of almost 10 percentage points from the top of the ticket, which was Brian Kemp in this race, and the next link down, which was Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker in 2022. Weak candidates lose in close elections. Look what happened in Arizona with Blake Masters in 22. Look on the governor's side with Kari Lake. Look in 2024 and on the Senate side in Arizona with Kari Lake. Look in 2022, Pennsylvania. Someone who could almost be considered, their brain is not working properly, lost beat Mehmet Oz. Like these were winnable races here. All of these. Nevada was a winnable race, and I'm not going to say as much about Adam Laxalt. I have less issues with him. But Blake Masters, Kerry Lake, go to the governor's side. Look at this. Katie Hobbs won this election here. Tony Evers, Gretchen Whitmer won in Michigan. It was just not great. Not great candidate quality. Candidate quality really matters in these races, especially statewide races. And you can clearly see that because Georgia is currently represented by 2 Democrat senators. While at the same time, Republicans have a trifecta in the state government. And they've had it for roughly 20 years. Brian Kemp, you look at the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, the insurance commissioner, the state auditor, they're all held by Republicans. You can see that the Senate in Georgia is held by Republicans. The House of Representatives in Georgia is held by Republicans. And, you put all of this together, you can see so clear as day why the stakes are so high in this race. And like we said, with Brian Kemp not running in this race, Republicans must nominate a Republican with broad appeal across the state. Someone who can appeal to suburban women and suburban men, college-educated men, or someone who's just not Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, lucky for us, she announced right after Brian Kemp announced that he wasn't running that she also was not running in 2026, which was great. The reality is even in her home district, Marjorie Taylor Greene in District 14 ran behind Trump in many districts, even up to like 14 percentage points in a certain county. She ran behind Trump in one of the most conservative districts in America. And it was an absolute gift to the Republican Party. I believe it was from the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, who actually had an article on this talking about how Trump was behind the scenes really trying to get Marjorie Taylor Greene to not run in this race. So that's a big thing to note there. Trump may have saved the Republicans in Georgia because she would have got absolutely destroyed. She would have won a primary. Like, you can see, she was leading most relevant primary polls with like 40 to 50% of the vote. But then you jump over to the general election, and she's getting smoked. The only Republican candidate where Jon Ossoff is consistently above 50 percentage points in these polls. The only other one was against John King. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, 51, 54, and 48. Well, at the same time, Brian Kemp is consistently beating Jon Ossoff by 3 points, 3 points, 6 points. No, that's 7 points. 7 points and 6 points. Just some massive, massive margins, obviously. Especially with all of these other candidates. With more name recognition, you're going to see these margins tighten down. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not... Even if Brad Raffensperger was the nominee, which I think he'd be a horrible nominee, there's no way that he's getting 38%. No way. I say their floor is like 45. And that's like a great night for, astonishing night. Maybe even like 47 or 48 is their floor at the end of the day, especially when you look at a midterm, lower turnout. Georgia's a weird state where even the higher propensity voters are Republicans at the end of the day. That's something nationwide we've seen, is that Republicans have become less and less high propensity voters. They become less highly educated. They have been less wealthy individuals. But Georgia kind of bucks that trend when it comes to Republicans. There's been some data around that shows that the Republicans actually have higher propensity voters in the state of Georgia, so a lower turnout election would actually help Republicans in Georgia. I've heard some data around that. Now, obviously, we need to see how that plays out, but very different demographics compared to a place like Wisconsin, where you saw high propensity voters give it to Trump in 24, and then 4 or 5 months later, elect a liberal Supreme Court justice by, 10 percentage points? But ultimately what I'm getting at here is that I still believe Republicans have an opportunity to win this seat with I would say, generic Republican. I hate to use that term, generic Republican, but it's like, look at this. You see, but anybody basically is trailing Jon Ossoff. And then generic Republican is neck and neck with Jon Ossoff. And the interesting about this poll right here, this single poll, in this same poll right here, head to head, Jon Ossoff 44 and 44 with generic Republican. When the people who were being polled were told that Jon Ossoff voted against or voted to allow women, mentally ill men, in sports, in women's sports, the generic Republicans skyrocketed by like 6 percentage points here. So definitely something to keep in touch or keep in mind. You know, Trump ran in 2024. He ran on that big, he had a big, very successful ad campaign that was talking about how Trump is for you. Kamala Harris was for they and them. Definitely something that you look at leaning into in the state of Georgia. Something just to throw out there. And trust me, it is my wish, it is my goal. I'm going to make as many videos as I possibly can, just absolutely ripping on Jon Ossoff and how terrible. Like, I've got a whole lineup of videos lined up on how terrible Jon Ossoff is. We're going to get to more of that here in just a second, talking about the political liabilities for Jon Ossoff, which there's a lot. There's a lot of political liabilities. No matter how much they try and tell you, the New York Times tries to tell you he's a centrist. He may be a centrist on some policies, but when it matters, he is just as liberal as the rest of them. Like, let's not get this wrong. Remember, he told us that February 2024, Ossoff criticized the report of when Robert Hur's report came out, saying that he wasn't going to charge Biden because he was basically inept. He was an old, how would you say that? An old, I want to say frugal, but that's money-wise, frail man. He was feeble. He wants us to trust him, but yet he told us that Biden didn't have a mental decline. Now we know that Biden has metastatic prostate cancer. And, for a second, we all pray for Joe Biden. Like, at the end of the day, I don't like his politics, but I've had many, many people in my life. I actually had someone very close to me, or someone in the family who had prostate cancer, spread to the bone, spread to the brain. It's a horrible disease. It is truly horrible. But I wasn't trying to elect my family member the next president of the United States. It severely impacted his cognitive abilities, and it was very sad. Very, very sad. But Jon Ossoff wants us to trust him, but we trusted him in 2024 that Biden was okay. But he was totally wrong. He just lied to us. He totally lied to us. It was a total cover-up by the Democrats, by the media. Totally a cover-up. But getting back to it, this is why I believe that a generic Republican, a more establishment Republican would win this race. And right now, you're seeing people like Buddy Carter, like John King, like Mike Collins, Tyler Harper, Rich McCormick, Doug Collins, Brian Jack. These are names that are being floated out there. Obviously, right now, Buddy Carter, John King are in this race. I think, if I'm being 100% honest, who do I think would be a good candidate in a general election? I think Rich McCormick could be. I do think Buddy Carter would be a good candidate. I think there may be some people who disagree with that, but I think he would be a good candidate. John King, who's the insurance commissioner, even Doug Collins, who right now is the Secretary of Veteran Affairs. He used to represent Georgia's 9th Congressional District and ran in 2020 for the U.S. Senate. Obviously, did not get a majority of the vote and was actually eliminated. And I also think someone like Brian Jack. Brian Jack you are looking for a pragmatic candidate. Brian Jack worked in the Trump administration. He worked on the 2024 Trump campaign. I think that there is someone who has broad appeal. And like I said, I would be okay with a more establishment Republican in this race simply to not risk a general election. Like, I simply would be. Because Georgia, if you're looking at the states that are Republican states, Georgia is a weaker Republican state. It just is. It is a weaker Republican state. And running the most MAGA candidate that you can find would just be a terrible idea. Like we said, just look at the polling for Marjorie Taylor Greene. The only Republican that Ossoff is consistently getting above 50% is against Marjorie Taylor Greene. And right now, hypothetical polling has Mike Collins right now leading in a Republican primary if Marjorie Taylor Greene is not in it, which we know she's not going to be. You're looking at the predictions. It really is a toss-up. If you're looking at my predictions, I have this as a toss-up. This is where I'm at right now. It is a toss-up race as of right now. We still need more data. But to be honest with you, Republicans better pull their crap together. And it's like, look, I want a good primary, but we don't need a vicious primary where they're going to be so badly bruised that it's impossible for them to win in a general. Jon Ossoff raised $11 million. $11 million in the first quarter of this year. He has $11 million cash on hand right now. Cash on hand. And we know the National Democrats are going to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, chaired by Tim Scott, said they're going to be pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into this race as well. So obviously, there's big things here. But he's in a cash-wise a good position. But he also has a ton of liabilities. A ton of liabilities going into this race. Simply the fact that he is a Democrat in a Republican-leaning state. He aligns way too closely with the National Democrat policies. He's not like the Democrat version of Susan Collins. He votes in line with the Democrats, 98% of the time at the end of the day. That's the reality of the situation. He is not like this Democrat Susan Collins or even like a John Fetterman who's willing to buck the party in certain situations. This is a guy who has been very critical of Israel in the Israel-Hamas war. And granted, look, I really loved what Tucker Carlson said. Tucker Carlson had Dave Smith on his podcast recently. I really love what he said. He kind of compared himself to Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro loves Israel. Tucker Carlson, he likes Israel. I really resonate with that statement. Look, Israel, there's never been a more pro-Israel president than Donald Trump. Let's just get that out there to begin with. There's never been a more pro-Israel president or candidate than Donald Trump is. End of discussion. No matter what the disagreements are with Bibi, no matter what's going on, he is the strongest and is the biggest ally in the American government for Israel. But I'm not going to sit here and say Israel's perfect or that they're justified in every single thing that they've ever done or everything they've done in this war. You do have to but if I'm going to pick a side, yes, Israel, duh. Israel was attacked by a terrorist organization. Of course I'm going to choose their side. It doesn't mean everything they did was great or perfect or that there hasn't been a ton of bloodshed in this. But at the end of the day, we know that Jon Ossoff voted to block an arms sale to Israel so they could defend themselves. Remember, Jon Ossoff, he tried to play this centrist Democrat. But let's not forget, he's a soft on crime, soft on immigration, illegal immigration senator. He could have had a backbone and bucked his party. No. He allowed over 10 million illegal immigrants to pour into our country under the Biden administration. Where was Jon Ossoff pressuring Joe Biden to do anything about this? Oh, we need legislation. We didn't need effing legislation. We needed a new goddamn president. We needed a new president. Because he was totally complacent with Biden shipping in 2.5 million illegal immigrants on a yearly basis. He was. He didn't stand up to the Democrats then. He didn't stand up to the Democrats. He didn't stand up when recently they passed a bill in the Senate that would bar transgender I want transgender women, but mentally ill men who dress in women's clothing and put on makeup and try and look like a woman. They're not women, they're men who have a mental illness, and I wish them Godspeed in recovery. I hope they seek out help. But these are mentally ill men, and Jon Ossoff was okay with it. He was okay with them competing in women's sports, taking away trophies from young women. Huge liabilities for him. And then simply the fact that he is very, very anti-Trump. Very anti-Trump. And he is willing to, already has come out and said that he wants to impeach Trump. He's ready to impeach Trump. Remember how that backfired? Impeachment has backfired on almost every party that has impeached the president in power. It backfired on Republicans in the late 90s. Democrats won the 98 midterms. It backfired on Democrats in 2019. You could even say it backfired on them in 2021 when they did it over the Capitol riots. But maybe it wasn't that. It was more that they then tried to prosecute him on crimes that basically didn't exist. There was no injured party, but yet somehow they're bringing crimes against Trump. They tried to convict him on this stuff. But at the end of the day, he's just very anti-Trump, and he has a lot of liabilities going into this race. And the fact that Republicans are going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars here. Hundreds of millions of dollars. He has a lot of issues. Hit him hard on immigration. hit him hard on his anti-Trump positioning, how he's not willing to work with Republicans. He's willing to stop Donald Trump however he can, even if Donald Trump is espousing views that he supports. And if we can get a generic Republican, even an establishment Republican, that would be great. That would be wonderful here. But so obviously, lots of liabilities for Jon Ossoff going into this race. So that is going to wrap things up for today, folks. Now, if you're new to the channel, if you've never watched this before, or if you have and you like what we're doing, look, I'm an independent journalist. I put out what my ideas are. I have no big corporate sponsors. And even if I did, they have nothing to do with my views. My views are my views, and if someone doesn't want to sponsor me, doesn't want to do business with me, that's on them. I'm not controlled by any billionaires. I'm not controlled by any large media corporation that's going to push down a narrative. I'm going to report on the facts that I find. Obviously, as you know, I'm a right-leaning individual. I like to think of myself as a common sense conservative. Common sense. I am not here to be full MAGA. I am not here to be anti-Trump. I am here to support, I generally support Republican policies that are pushed forward. But when they go too far on the Republican side, I'm here. Look, you can go listen to all my videos. Listen to what I've had to say on tariffs. Listen to what I've had to say on due process when it comes to illegal immigration. We need to get these illegal immigrants out. But you also have to follow the law at the same time. You are hurting yourself. Like I could go in for a long time, but like there's plenty of places. You know, Trump needs to refocus on the economy. Heavily refocus on the economy. We've talked a lot about the fact that, you know, this new spending bill that's going to go through Congress, simply the fact that they want to raise the debt ceiling $5 trillion, which is kind of a joke. Where's the fiscal responsibility there? The fact that we need serious restructuring to our entitlement programs, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps. I am not here to be do whatever Donald Trump wants or be totally anti-Donald Trump. If there's something Trump does, I'm pro-Trump. If there's something Trump does that I don't like, I'm anti-Trump. It's just or anti-Trump policies. It's as simple as that. And if that's what you're looking for, if you're just looking for someone with some common sense, drop down below, hit that subscribe button. That is the best thing you can do to support our channel. And if you see a topic that interests you, join us. Shoot me a note in my comments. My email is in my description of my channel. Shoot me an email if you have a topic that you'd like me to cover. I've had multiple topics that have been given to me by people who watch the channel that have turned into very, very successful videos. Very, very important topics that we're talking about. So if that's something you're looking for, someone with common sense who's going to push forward. And look, I'm willing to say when I'm wrong. If I make a mistake, I'm willing to say that. I'm not here to live in my own little bubble. I'm here to live in reality. I'm a realist. I like to live in reality. And so if that's what you're looking for, like I said, supporting the channel, hitting that like button, hitting the share button, hitting the subscribe button. That's the best way to show that you support our channel. And let a friend know about us. Share us with a friend. Share us on Facebook. Share us wherever you want to share stuff. Share it. Let's get more and more people involved with this. Let's get more and more people with a common sense mentality about what's going on. But that is going to wrap things up for today, folks. As always, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future, and we will catch you next time, folks.